The stars stretched across the black sky like spilled glitter when Darren Holt's ship finally gave up. The warning alarms had screamed for hours, but Darren kept ignoring them, hoping the little freighter could push through one more light jump. It couldn't. A spark caught, circuits fried, and with a sound like a giant exhaling, his ship went dark. Darren cursed under his breath as the emergency lights flickered on. The ship's computer muttered something about irreversible power failure. He slapped the console and muttered, yeah. I noticed. His ship tilted, groaned, and then was pulled into the gravity of the closest planet. The landing was less a landing and more a crash. Darren managed to guide the ship into a wide field before it slammed into the dirt, skidded across cracked soil, and came to a smoking stop near a cluster of hills. He sat in the cockpit, chest heaving, staring at the cracked windshield. Well, he said to himself, that could have gone worse. I could be dead, he checked the sensors. The planet was breathable. Though rich with some strange gas the computer flagged as irritant. He would survive, but he wasn't going to enjoy it. Darren packed his survival bag, strapped on a utility belt, and stepped outside. The air hit him like a damp cloth, thick and buzzing with scents he couldn't name. The field was full of giant reed-like plants with bulbous tops that swayed, even though there was no wind. That was when he saw them. Figures emerged from between the plants. They weren't human, at least not in any familiar sense. They looked like giant mantises walking upright, their thin bodies covered in plates that gleamed faintly in the strange sunlight. Their heads had large crystal eyes that shifted colors like oil on water. Darren froze. The aliens froze. Darren said carefully. Hi there. The tallest one clicked its mandibles, then produced a buzzing noise. A small device hanging from its neck whirred, and suddenly the sound reshaped into words. Human, it said in a flat voice. You have come. Darren blinked. Yes? I guess I have. The group exchanged chitters, then surrounded him. To his surprise, their movements weren't hostile. Instead, they looked at him with something like excitement. One of them tilted its head and said through the translator, The village needs you. Darren had many questions. Why did they speak his language? Why were they so calm about meeting a random human who just fell from the sky? And what did they mean by need? But when one of the aliens gestured for him to follow, he decided he didn't have a better option. His ship wasn't flying again anytime soon, and if they wanted to eat him, they probably would have done it already. So he followed. The village appeared an hour later. It wasn't primitive, though at first glance it seemed so. The homes were tall, organic structures, shaped from what looked like woven reeds and hardened clay. Strange glowing fungi lined the streets, casting soft light even in daylight. The place smelled of earth, smoke, and something sweet, like honey left out too long. Hundreds of the insectoid aliens moved about. Some carried baskets of glowing fruit. Others worked with large tools, scraping at metal shells or stirring vats of thick liquid. All of them stopped and stared when Darren walked into view. Human. The whispers spread. Human has come. Darren felt like he had walked into a play where everyone already knew his part except him. The tallest alien, who seemed to be a leader, brought Darren to the center of the village. There, on a raised platform, stood a massive machine. It was old, half-broken, with pipes sticking out at odd angles. Several aliens worked around it, fiddling with wires and dripping fluids into compartments. The leader gestured proudly. This is the hatchery. The translator device buzzed as the alien spoke again. You will serve as maker of babies, Darren choked. I'll serve as what? The aliens all looked at him expectantly. Their antennae twitched. Their eyes shone with strange light. Maker of babies, the leader repeated. Darren rubbed the back of his neck. Okay, listen. I think there's been some kind of mistake. I fix ships, not, make babies. The aliens exchanged confused clicks. The translator spat out broken phrases like not ship. But life and human skill is life skill. Darren felt sweat gather on his forehead. He had survived pirate raids, asteroid storms, and one very awkward date on Titan, but this was something else. Still, he kept calm. So, he asked slowly, what exactly does a maker of babies do? The leader gestured toward the huge machine. One of the aliens opened a hatch, and inside Darren saw rows of glowing pods. Small, wriggling shapes floated in thick liquid like larvae waiting to hatch. The sight was both strange and oddly beautiful. The leader spoke proudly. Here we grow the next generation. Without hatchery, village dies. Machine is failing. We need human hands, human knowledge, human fixing. And suddenly Darren understood they didn't want him to literally make babies. They wanted him to fix the machine that made babies. He almost laughed out loud. The tension left his chest like steam from a kettle. Oh, Darren said, smiling weakly. You mean maintenance, engineering, repairs? The leader tilted its head. Human word repairs. Yes, human is maker of babies. The crowd cheered. Darren winced. He hadn't agreed to anything yet. But as the aliens clapped their clawed hands together and chirped happily, Darren realized he might not have much of a choice. His ship was dead. His supplies would run out in days. And these villagers clearly expected him to help. Besides, it wasn't the worst deal. Food, shelter, and maybe even tools to fix his distress beacon. All in exchange for tinkering with a broken alien machine. He could live with that. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was going to get complicated. Very complicated. Darren looked at the machine again, the pipes wheezing and the pods flickering. If this was their only way to grow new life, the stakes were higher than he'd thought. He sighed, turning to the leader. All right. Show me what's broken. But just for the record, back where I come from, we don't usually call engineers makers of babies. The leader clicked happily, antennae waving. Human is funny. Human will save village. The next morning, Darren woke to the sound of chittering outside his new home. The aliens had given him a hut near the hatchery. It wasn't bad. Warm, dry, with walls that smelled faintly of honey. The bed was a pile of woven fibers, soft enough if you didn't mind the occasional insect crawling over your legs. When Darren stepped outside, a crowd of villagers was already waiting. Dozens of colorful eyes stared at him, shining with expectation. Some of them carried tools. Others carried baskets of glowing fruit which they placed at his feet as offerings. Maker of babies rises, one of them announced proudly. Darren groaned. Please stop calling me that, the translator buzzed. But of course it gave the same result. Maker of babies. The villagers cheered. The tall leader, who had introduced himself yesterday as Kurt, waved Darren over. Human. Machine waits. Life waits. Darren followed him to the hatchery. The big device stood in the center of the village like a holy monument. Its pipes hissed, valves leaked, and strange slime dripped down the sides. Every few minutes the machine groaned like a sick animal. Inside the pods, Darren could see tiny larval shapes twitching. Some pods glowed bright and steady. Others flickered weakly as though about to die. Kurt placed a claw on Darren's shoulder. Baby's weak. Without repair, no new generation. Village ends. Darren swallowed hard. No pressure then. He opened his survival bag and pulled out a set of human tools. A multi-scanner, a plasma cutter, and, his favorite, duct tape. The aliens crowded around, gasping and clicking as if he had drawn a sword made of lightning. This, Darren explained, holding up the duct tape, is called tape. It fixes everything, the translator stuttered, then announced proudly, human carries sacred ribbon of repair. The crowd bowed. Darren sighed. This is getting out of hand. He spent hours crawling over the machine. The design made no sense to him. It wasn't purely mechanical. Pipes pumped fluids, yes, but also glowed with energy that didn't follow any physics Darren understood. Symbols marked each section. Some looked like chemical diagrams, others like prayers carved into metal. It was a strange mix of science and religion. Who built this thing? Darren asked aloud. Kurt answered simply, makers before us. Long ago we only maintain, we do not change. Yeah, well, Darren muttered. That explains why it's falling apart. By evening, Darren had managed to stabilize 2 failing pods. It wasn't much, but it kept the larvae inside alive. The villagers erupted into cheers. Some even fell to their knees, praising him as if he had performed a miracle. Darren wiped sweat from his forehead. I just patched a leaking valve. Anyone could have done it. But to the villagers it was far more. That night the village held a feast. Strange fruits were roasted until their skins burst with juice. Insectoid musicians beat on hollow shells, making a rhythm that rattled Darren's chest. Aliens danced with clumsy joy, clicking their mandibles in laughter. Darren sat in the center, surrounded by food and praise. Every few minutes someone would bring him another gift. A carved figurine, a bundle of herbs, or shiny pebbles. Human is Lifebringer, one villager said. Human saves eggs, another added. Darren smiled awkwardly. He had been many things in his life. A pilot, a smuggler, even a dishwasher once, but never a Lifebringer. Still, he couldn't shake a growing worry. If this machine broke completely, could he really fix it? The next day, the problem showed itself. A loud alarm echoed through the village. Darren rushed to the hatchery and saw smoke pouring from one side. The pods on the far row flickered violently, their liquid boiling. The larvae inside thrashed weakly. Villagers screamed, rushing about in panic. Babies burning. One cried, "Save them!" Another shouted. Darren sprinted forward. He scanned the machine and saw the issue immediately. A cooling system had failed and the pods were overheating. "Okay," he muttered. "Think, what do I have?" His tools weren't enough. He needed something to cool the pods fast. Then he spotted a barrel of thick blue liquid nearby. He pointed. "What's that?" Kurt answered, "Sweet water." "Food for larvae," Darren grinned. "Even better. Coolant." He pried open the pipes and redirected the flow. The villagers gasped as he poured sweet water into the system. It hissed, bubbled, and then began to circulate through the pods. The boiling slowed. The larvae calmed. The machine groaned one last time, and settled. The pods glowed steady once again. The villagers erupted into cheers so loud the ground seemed to shake. Human saves the children. Maker of babies is true. They lifted Darren onto their shoulders, onto their clawed arms, and carried him around the hatchery like a hero. Darren held up his hands. All right. Put me down before you drop me." But inside he felt a rush of pride. He had done it. He had saved them. Later, as the crowd dispersed, Kurt stayed behind with Darren. "You did more than repair. You changed the hatchery. None of us would dare do this." "Only human," Darren frowned. "Changed? You mean using sweet water? That was just improvising." "To us," Kurt said slowly, "to change the hatchery is forbidden. It is sacred, but you are not bound by our laws. Perhaps that is why you were sent." "Sent? No, I crashed here." Kurt tilted his head, antennae twitching. "Accidents are also paths chosen by the stars." Darren chuckled. "Sure, let's go with that." That night, Darren couldn't sleep. He lay on his fiber bed, staring at the glowing fungi on the ceiling. He had fixed the hatchery for now. But the whole machine was unstable. If more systems failed, the larvae could die and the village with them. He realized something else too. The villagers weren't just asking him to fix their machine. They were asking him to be responsible for their future. That was a heavy weight for one man with a roll of duct tape. Still, as he drifted into uneasy sleep, Darren couldn't help but smile. For the first time in years, he felt like he truly mattered. But far away beyond the hills, lights flickered in the sky. Something or someone was watching. The morning after the overheating incident, Darren woke to find a group of young aliens standing outside his hut. They carried small bowls of steaming liquid and stared at him with wide, shimmering eyes. "What's this?" Darren asked, still groggy. One of them held up the bowl. "For Lifebringer, drink." Darren peered into it. The liquid was green and bubbled faintly, releasing a sharp smell like boiled cabbage mixed with gasoline. Thanks," he said cautiously. "But does it kill humans?" The alien tilted its head. "It makes us strong." That's not an answer. But the children kept staring, and Darren didn't have the heart to refuse. He took a small sip. The taste was awful, like sour vinegar, but within seconds warmth spread through his body. His fatigue lifted, and he felt strangely alert. He lowered the bowl in surprise. "Okay, not bad." The children chirped happily and scuttled away, leaving Darren blinking after them. When he reached the hatchery, a crowd was already waiting. The big machine hissed and groaned louder than usual. Parts of its surface flickered with orange sparks. Kurt, the leader, rushed over. "Human, maker of babies, the hatchery grows unstable again." Darren sighed. "Yeah, I can see that." He pulled out his scanner and swept it across the machine. The readings made no sense. Energy spikes flashed everywhere, as though the machine was alive and trying to fight him. "Great," he muttered. "It's not just a machine. It's a nightmare." He climbed inside the outer shell, crawling through narrow tunnels that stank of chemicals. Pipes dripped onto his clothes. Strange humming sounds echoed like voices whispering in a language he couldn't understand. At one point, Darren swore he saw symbols shifting across the walls, like glowing runes rearranging themselves. He blinked and they were gone. "Okay," he whispered. "Either I'm losing my mind or this thing is way more advanced than I thought." Hours passed. Darren tightened bolts, patched leaks, and rerouted power flows. The villagers outside waited in silence, holding their breath. Finally, Darren emerged, covered in slime and sweat. "For now," he announced, "the machine won't explode, but I need parts, real parts. I can't keep using duct tape forever." The translator garbled his words. "Human requires sacred ribbons of eternity," it declared. The villagers gasped and bowed. Darren slapped his forehead. "That's not what I said." But it didn't matter. In their eyes, he had spoken divine wisdom. Over the next few days, Darren became part of village life. He helped repair smaller tools, taught the villagers to clean their equipment properly, and even built a simple water filter using rocks and cloth. Every small thing he did amazed them. One afternoon, while showing a group of children how to sharpen a blade safely, Darren realized something. They didn't just see him as a worker. They saw him as a teacher. For the first time since crashing, he felt useful, but not everyone was happy. One evening, a group of older villagers approached Kurt while Darren was working. Darren overheard their clicking voices through the translator. "Human changes the hatchery," one said. "It is forbidden." "Human breaks tradition," another added. Kurt's voice was calm but firm. "Without human, the hatchery dies. With human, it lives. We must accept change." The older villagers hissed angrily and stormed away. Darren frowned. He knew trouble was brewing. That night, the trouble arrived. The alarm screeched through the village, loud, sharp, and terrifying. Darren ran outside and saw flames near the hatchery. Shadows moved in the darkness, larger and bulkier than the insectoid villagers. Kurt rushed to Darren's side. "Raiders!" "Raiders? You mean aliens like you? Not like us. Broken ones, cast out long ago. They come for hatchery." "They come for babies," Darren's stomach clenched. "You're telling me there are baby-stealing alien raiders out there?" Kurt clicked grimly. "Yes." Figures burst from the shadows, hulking insectoids with jagged armor and crude weapons. Their eyes glowed red and their mandibles dripped saliva. They roared and charged straight for the hatchery. The villagers tried to fight, swinging tools and throwing rocks, but the raiders were stronger. They knocked aside defenders and smashed huts as they advanced. Darren grabbed a metal pipe from the ground and swung at the nearest raider. The blow barely staggered it. The alien raised its blade to strike. At the last second, Kurt leapt between them, slashing with his claws. The raider screeched and stumbled back. "Protect the hatchery!" Kurt shouted. The battle raged. Darren fought clumsily, dodging strikes and swinging wildly. His heart pounded with fear. He wasn't a soldier, he was just a guy with bad luck and duct tape. But when he saw a group of raiders breaking into the hatchery itself, something inside him snapped. "Oh no, you don't." He charged after them, using his scanner like a club. He managed to knock one raider down, then slammed the hatchery door shut before the others could get inside. The machine groaned in protest, as if aware of the chaos around it. The pods inside flickered dangerously. Darren shouted to the villagers, "If this thing goes down, you all go down with it." His words, translated poorly, came out as, "If sacred babies fall, the sky itself will burn." The villagers screamed in fury and fought harder than ever. After what felt like hours, the raiders finally retreated into the darkness, leaving behind bodies and broken weapons. The village was a mess. Huts burned, supplies scattered, and many wounded. But the hatchery still stood. The villagers gathered around Darren, chanting his name. "Human, human, human." Darren slumped against the machine, exhausted. Yeah. I'm amazing. Somebody get me water." Later, Kurt approached him. "You fought bravely. You protected the hatchery. Now the village sees you not only as maker of babies, but as protector of life," Darren groaned. "Great, another title. Just what I needed." But deep down, he felt something else. Responsibility. These people were depending on him, not just to fix their machine, but to keep them safe. And worse, the raiders would be back. As Darren looked up at the smoking sky, he thought of the strange lights he had seen before. Something bigger was coming, something that might make raiders look like the least of his problems. Darren awoke to the smell of smoke and burnt wood. His hut had survived the raider attack, but he could see the scars across the village. Huts were smashed, smoke curled into the sky, and ash floated in the wind like tiny gray snowflakes. Maker of babies. chirped a small voice. He looked down to see one of the young villagers holding a steaming bowl of green liquid. The child's eyes shone with worry. Thanks, Darren muttered. Did anyone else get this? The child nodded eagerly. Human protector. Drink, grow strong. Darren sighed, drank, and felt the familiar warmth course through him. He winced at the taste, but grinned. All right, let's see what we're dealing with. Outside, Kurt was coordinating repairs with the villagers. They moved in silence, their movements precise and careful. Darren approached, scanning the area. Damage report, he said, pointing to a burnt hut. 2 huts destroyed, minor injuries, supply depots compromised, Kurt replied. The hatchery survived. That is all that matters. Darren frowned. That's not all that matters. They need homes, supplies, food, and some serious security measures. Raiders won't give up so easily. Kurt tilted his head. Human sees more than village sees. You understand what must be done? Darren muttered. I'm just a guy with duct tape, remember? He spent the next hours inspecting the hatchery. The heat damage from the previous attack had caused pipes to warp, energy conduits flickered, and some pods had minor cracks. Darren knelt beside one pod, peering into the glowing liquid. The larvae inside twitched nervously. He muttered, You guys don't deserve this. Kurt approached. Human feels responsibility. Human understands life. Darren looked up. Yeah, but you know, it's one thing to repair a machine. It's another to be responsible for an entire generation of your people. The translator buzzed, but Kurt nodded knowingly. You must be both, Darren sighed. He already liked these aliens, but their expectations were enormous. As the day wore on, Darren devised a plan. He gathered materials from his crashed ship, scavenged what he could from the village, and began building protective barriers around the hatchery. The villagers helped. They handed him tools, followed instructions, and even carried materials heavier than Darren could lift alone. Some of the younger aliens watched closely, learning. It's like teaching a class, Darren muttered to himself. Except the students have claws, wings, and a very different idea of personal space. By evening, the hatchery was fortified. Small energy shields hummed around it, pipes were reinforced, and the pods had emergency cooling systems he rigged from sweetwater reservoirs and spare wiring. The villagers cheered. Darren grimaced. Yeah. Don't make me feel even more sacred than I already do. That night, Kurt brought him aside. Human, the leader said quietly. We owe you more than life. You are trusted, but now the choice comes. Darren raised an eyebrow. Choice? What choice? Kurt gestured toward the hills beyond the village. In the distance, small red lights flickered like eyes watching. Raiders will return stronger, more of them. They will come for the hatchery. And for you. You have options, Darren frowned. Options? I don't exactly have reinforcements. Kurt's antennae twitched. Human may leave. Human may stay and fight. Human may lead. Darren's stomach clenched. Leave? Stay? Lead? He hadn't thought about leadership. He was a pilot, a fixer, someone who survived by luck and improvisation. Leadership was terrifying. The next morning, scouts reported movement on the horizon. The raiders were returning, at least twice as many as before. Darren studied the hatchery. If it fell, the entire village's future would be lost. But if he stayed, he might die. He turned to Kurt. Okay, here's the plan. We reinforce the hatchery, evacuate non-essential villagers, and set traps for the raiders. If we do this right, we can survive. Kurt clicked in approval. Human is clever. Human shows courage. Human leads, Darren groaned. Great. I didn't sign up to be a war hero. The following hours were a blur of preparation. Darren instructed villagers to carry water and repair materials to hidden tunnels, rig traps with vines and heavy logs, and set up alarms using hanging metal sheets. The younger aliens followed every order diligently, learning from his improvisation. By evening, the village was ready. Darren took a moment to observe the bustling activity. These aliens, strange insectoid alien, were resilient, clever, and brave. And they trusted him. He realized something. He didn't have to fight alone. He had a community willing to follow him, and together they could survive. At nightfall, the raiders attacked. Their armor glinted in the dim light, their mandibles clicking in anger. They charged toward the hatchery with brute force, shouting strange war cries. Darren activated the emergency cooling system, sending clouds of sweetwater steam into the path of the raiders. The liquid was harmless to the aliens but blinded their vision temporarily. Villagers triggered the traps Darren had set. Logs swung, nets fell, and vines entangled the raiders. One raider roared, struggling, while another was sent tumbling into a shallow pit Darren had dug. Amid the chaos, Darren used his makeshift energy devices to reinforce the hatchery's shield, holding it steady against brute blows. The fight lasted for hours. Darren, exhausted and bleeding from minor cuts, realized something remarkable. The villagers weren't just following him. They were adapting, learning, and thinking for themselves. They were no longer dependent on him for every decision. He smiled grimly. "Yeah, you guys got this. I'm just here for the heavy lifting." By dawn, the raiders had retreated. Many were injured. Others had fled entirely. The village was battered but alive. The hatchery still glowed, humming steadily. Darren collapsed beside it, breathing hard. Kurt approached and placed a clawed hand on his shoulder. "Human, you have chosen well. You did not leave. You did not flee. You stayed, you led. You protected life." Darren chuckled weakly. Yeah. Just another Tuesday." But inside he felt a surge of pride. He had faced impossible odds, saved the future of the village, and realized that humans could do more than survive. They could inspire, teach, and lead. Later, as the sun rose, Darren looked at the hatchery. The pods glowed with tiny movements, new life thriving inside. The villagers gathered around, bowing in reverence. "Human, maker of babies, protector of life, teacher of future," the translator announced. Darren groaned. Okay. Can we at least shorten the title a bit?" The villagers clicked in unison, a sound that somehow felt like laughter. Darren smiled. He didn't need titles. He had found purpose, friends, and a home, albeit an alien one. But he knew this was only the beginning. Somewhere out there, the raiders would return, and perhaps other dangers awaited them, ones he couldn't yet see. Still, for the first time since he crashed, Darren felt ready, because he wasn't just surviving, he was leading. The morning sun painted the village in soft orange light, but Darren didn't have time to admire it. He stood atop a small hill, scanning the horizon with his scanner. The raiders hadn't returned yet, but Darren knew they were out there. Bigger forces could be coming too. He needed a plan, not hope. Kurt approached, antenna flicking nervously. "Human, you worry too much." Darren rubbed his forehead. "I worry because I know what happens if I'm wrong. One mistake in the hatchery and all of you are gone." Kurt tilted his head. "Then do not be wrong." Darren laughed bitterly. "Right, thanks for that pep talk." He went down to the hatchery. The machine hummed steadily, pods glowing with tiny larval movements. Darren ran his hands along the panels, checking each pipe, each valve. "I can't just defend this place," he muttered. "I need to make it smarter." He opened a panel and started rerouting energy flows. Using parts from his crashed ship and some alien materials, he created automated defense systems, turrets that would block raiders, alarm triggers, and emergency pod shields that could activate without him being there. The villagers gathered, watching him work. Some of them carried tools mimicking his movements. Darren realized they were learning quickly. "Good," he said. "You'll need these skills one day." The translator buzzed out praise. "Human is teacher of life and guardian of hatchery." Darren groaned. "Great. That title's even longer than before." By midday, the village was ready. Traps were set, defenses reinforced, and escape routes mapped. Darren gathered the villagers in a circle. "Listen up," he said. "The raiders will come. They're bigger, stronger, and angrier than last time. But if we work together, we can stop them. Everyone has a job. Follow my instructions. Stay calm. Don't panic." The villagers clicked and chirped in agreement. Darren felt a surge of pride. They weren't just following orders, they trusted him. As the sun began to set, a dark line appeared on the horizon. Raiders, dozens of them, marching in formation, their red eyes glowing. Behind them, larger shapes moved, creatures Darren hadn't seen before. They were armored, massive, and clearly leaders of the raiders. "Okay," Darren muttered. "This just got serious." Kurt joined him. "Human, the choice again. Will you fight or flee?" Darren looked at the hatchery, at the glowing pods, at the villagers. He couldn't flee, not now. "Not ever, I fight," he said firmly. The first wave of raiders hit the village. Darren activated the automated defenses. Energy turrets hummed and fired harmless but powerful stuns at the raiders. Nets dropped from above, catching some of the smaller attackers. The villagers used traps, swinging logs and rolling boulders. The raiders were strong, but Darren's systems slowed them down. He ran from one post to another, fixing malfunctions, rerouting power, and keeping the hatchery safe. At one point, a massive raider broke through a barrier and lunged at Darren. He grabbed a metal pipe and shoved it into the raider's leg joint. The creature stumbled, giving Darren just enough time to climb atop a nearby turret and activate it. A pulse of energy knocked the raider backward. Darren was panting, bleeding, and exhausted, but the hatchery was safe. Hours passed. Darren coordinated every movement. The villagers fought bravely, inspired by his calm leadership. Younger aliens reinforced barriers, while older ones used clever tactics to flank raiders. Eventually, the raider leaders grew frustrated. They hadn't expected resistance, let alone clever traps. One of them stepped forward, roaring in frustration. Darren studied it carefully. If he could distract the leader, the rest would panic. He grabbed one of his old ship's signal devices and rigged it to emit a bright flash and loud noise. Tossing it into the center of the raiders, he ducked behind cover. The signal went off, blinding and deafening. The raider leader stumbled, knocking several others over. Chaos spread among the attackers. Darren seized the moment. Push them back. Don't let them regroup. The villagers surged forward, driving the raiders out. Within minutes, the enemy had fled into the night, leaving the village battered but victorious. The aftermath was quiet. Darren inspected the hatchery. Not a single pod had been lost. The larvae twitched, glowing gently in the steady hum of the machine. The villagers gathered around him, clicking and chirping in celebration. Some raised him in the air, chanting his name. Darren laughed, exhausted but happy. "You guys really overdo it with the titles," he said. The translator buzzed. "Human is savior." "Human is teacher. Human is maker of life," Darren groaned. "I give up. Just call me Darren." That night, Kurt came to him. "Human, you have done more than we imagined. You saved our children. You saved our future." Darren looked at the glowing pods. He realized something profound. He hadn't just fixed machines or fought raiders. He had taught, inspired, and led. Humans were not the strongest species in the galaxy, but they were clever, adaptable, and brave. "We did it together," Darren said. "You guys fought too." "Don't forget that," Kurt tilted his head. "Yes, but human." "You were the spark." Darren smiled faintly. "Okay, fine. I'll take the credit, but only a little." Days passed. The village began to rebuild. Huts were repaired, supplies replenished, and the hatchery operated more smoothly than ever. Darren trained the villagers to maintain it themselves, ensuring that life would continue without him always at the controls. He worked alongside them, not above them, teaching, fixing, and laughing. One evening, while watching the glowing pods, Darren realized the truth. Humans were not gods. They were not invincible warriors. But they had something rare, the ability to adapt, think, and care. That ability made humans special. That ability had saved this alien village. Weeks later, Darren repaired his ship's communication system. The signal was weak, but enough to send a message back to Earth. Not for help. Not for rescue. He keyed the device. A single message, a signal of life and hope. Humans are here. Life survives. We build, we protect, we teach. The villagers gathered around, watching as the message pulsed into the stars. Some clicked in awe. Others chirped excitedly. Darren smiled. "That's for all of us. A signal that we're not just survivors. We're builders."